I had to buy 2 tickets if I wanted to go. And then he drove, and it was down in Detroit, which is like a good 2-hour drive from where I lived. So that was nice. But that was, I got introduced to a ton of great bands that way, and like definitely like a culture shock moment, like an eye opening to like the tattoo world and just like heavy metal culture in general. Like I've never really been exposed to like heavy metal culture, and then you just see like all the crazy people with like the 6-foot-high mohawks and the crazy battle vests and all that shit running around. You're just like, oh my god, like I'm in the middle of a biking convention. What's happening?
Hey, what's up, Vox and Hops heads? I'm Matt, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, brought to you by Sound Talent Media and Evergreen Podcasts, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians, talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. I hope you had an amazing week. I most certainly did. This Vox and Hops episode is presented by Heavy Montreal. Heavy Montreal are Montreal's premier metal promoter. They put on a bunch of amazing shows all year long here in Montreal. And if you are ever in Montreal and you would like to go see a great show, well, I can guarantee you that Heavy Montreal will have you covered. I'm beyond stoked to have Heavy Montreal behind the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast. Now, before we jump into today's episode, I'd just like to tell you that I'm on tour, people. That's right. The Necromantium Part 2 tour is happening right now in the United States and Canada. That's right. The Necromantium Part 2 tour is simply incredible. I am out on tour with Carnifex, with my band Cryptopsy, of course, Mental Cruelty, Organectomy, and Heavy Hitter. This tour kicked off on October 4th and is running all the way until November 3rd. So you should most definitely come and see me and hang out with me. You can grab your tickets by going to voxandhops.com/Carnifex. Come and hang out with me. It's just an incredible lineup. You got everything from OG deathcore to new hardcore to orchestrated blackened deathcore to brutal slam, and then you got Cryptopsy, the OG tech death monsters, and plus I'm there. So come and hang out with me. Grab your tickets and come hang out with me on the Necromantium Part 2 tour. Now, today on the podcast, I'm very stoked to be with Nick Miller and Chris Fox of Flesh and Blood Robot. Get ready, everyone. This is Vox and Hops, episode number 471.
I warn you, what you are about to hear is very disturbing indeed.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Very, very stoked to be with Nick Miller and Chris Fox of Flesh and Blood Robot. Here we are. We are in Chicago. We are at Reggie's. I am out on the Death to All tour. We're doing a headliner date tonight, the As Summer Burns run. I was put in contact with Nick from my very good friend Mick Dempsey, who's going to be popping into this podcast in a second. We're going to be drinking some Miskatonic beers throughout it. Kumas Corner. Nick runs that, socials and marketing. What's going on? Kumas Corner. I know what it is, but maybe Vox and Hops heads don't know what it is.
Yeah,
so
of course.
Give everyone a rundown there.
So my technical title is the communications director, so I do all the marketing, promotions, artist relations, stuff like that. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with the concept of Kumas Corner, we are a heavy metal burger bar that has existed since 2005. Every burger on our menu is named after a different metal band, and they're all metal bands that we have worked with at some point in time, besides like Led Zeppelin.
So cool. I have not been there, and there is a very similar thing happening in Ottawa called The Coven, which I imagine has been heavily inspired by Kumas Corner. And there is a Cryptopsy burger there.
Oh, nice.
Albeit I can't eat it because I'm too vegan.
That's okay. Well, when we do you guys' burger, we will do a vegan version of it.
Hell yes.
And we can even
make me so happy.
Make it Matt's version of the burger.
Oh yes, I like that very much.
Yeah.
Why metal and burgers? What? How did this spawn? How did this come together?
So the first owner, his brother owns it now, but the original owner, it was just a big metalhead, and so like he would, just crank metal all the time. That was just the atmosphere. It was just a local neighborhood bar that actually started out with like fine dining. Like there was like steak on the menu, and over time, the mac and cheese started to pick up steam, and then the burgers picked up a lot of steam, and so they were just like, okay, screw all this other stuff on the menu. Like these two things sell really well, and then that was when like the owner decided to start naming them after bands and stuff like that. And
do you remember what the first one was?
The first burger that we named after a band, I want to say it was like the Metallica.
It's an easy first one.
Yeah. I wasn't around when they named the first one, so I don't remember off the top of my head. But I want to say it was the Metallica. The first big burger that we kind of got known for was the original Kuma burger. So what a lot of people don't know is that Kuma's also helped popularize the pretzel roll bun. because we were the first place to start doing that all the time because our burgers were so big and there was so much shit on top of them that we needed a burger bun that wouldn't fall apart.
Yeah.
So like all the other buns would like soak up all the juice and like
become soggy, disgusting,
soggy or disintegrate on your hands. Yeah. And so like the pretzel roll like holds its shape and like it holds all the juices and it keeps your burger in place. So there's that, and then we also kind of popularized throwing a fried egg on top of a burger. Like nobody had really been doing that. Like there was places that were, like we definitely didn't invent it, but a lot of places weren't like featuring it as like a thing that they did all the time. Where we had a burger where that was like the number one ingredient on the burger. So
very cool. What Chris? What's your first connection to Kumas? How did you get roped up into this?
Well, I don't particularly work for Kumas or anything, but I was roped into it through Nick, through the other band I'm in, See You Next Tuesday. When we started playing shows again and whatnot, we had a Chicago date, and he suggested that Kumas do a burger for See You Next Tuesday. So that was my first introduction to Kumas, and it was fantastic.
What was on that burger? Give us.
It was like a pizza type burger. It had like sliced like long ways pepperoni with sauce on, like a tomato sauce on the side. Yeah, marinara on the side. It was fantastic, but we ate it before we played,
which is a big mistake.
Destroyed us. It was probably the worst show we've ever played.
It's so funny
because of the burger, but it was worth it.
I have a good friend that replaces Ollie that told us a story that he went to an all-you-can-eat Chinese buffet. I'm talking about you, Dom, of course, and all-you-can-eat Chinese buffet before playing a show, and they were just dog shit on stage, just no energy. And the promoter wrote the booking agent, was like, why'd you send me this band? This band doesn't do shit. We just got a beer from the wonderful Mick from Miskatonic Brewing, Mick Dempsey. He says this is the money. He says it's the Pale Ale. It's the West Coast Wiccan. I feel like I said that. It's Vox&Hops. Let's do a cheers. Yes, sir. Beautiful foam on the crack there. Cheers to you all. Oh, that's smooth. A little piney bite. Very nice. Thank you so much. Let's talk about beer. Let's talk about your very first beer. We'll start with Nick. Do you remember the very first beer that you ever drank?
I mean, it's between PBR and King Cobra. I was like 16. Flesh and Blood Robot. We drank a lot when we were active. And it was mostly King Cobra and like shitty PBR and stuff like that.
I've never heard King Cobra.
So there was a store at the end of the street that did 3 King Cobra 40s. Ooh. Or two for $5 out the door.
Oh,
yeah, and so
I could smell it.
Yeah, that fueled a lot of parties for us.
God damn.
So that was the I didn't get into like craft beer and actual good beer until I was probably like 25, 26 years old, and I was living in Pittsburgh at the time. This was the era where Southern Tier and Stone and breweries like that kind of like ran the show, and then there was only a small handful of like regional breweries that were still active and growing and stuff. And then I mean, like, now like that's kind of where you want to go, right? Like the big players have overproduced their beer so much and shipped it all over the place. Who knows how long it's been sitting on the shelf?
It's very, very hard to be a craft beer enthusiast when you're not very, very tight with the identity of the brewery and like knowing what the drops are. Mm-hmm. You got to be really careful, and then they like sneakily don't print the data in a way that we can understand the normal people.
Yeah.
Of when it was packaged. So you got to be careful with that. How about you? Your first beer here, Chris?
First time I remember drinking obsessively. My dad used to throw these like big like kind of weekend rocker parties at our house like once a year, and they were just like huge, like mini backwoods festivals. And I was probably 14, and my best friend and I were sneaking drinks from the keg. And that was the first time I got drunk. And it was Bud Light. I remember it was dog shit.
That's crazy. But, so then craft beer for you, was it the same evolution as with Nick here with Stone and stuff? You weren't in Pittsburgh, though.
No. I've never really fully got into craft beer. I started getting into stuff like from like Great Lakes a while ago. Like more porters and stuff like that. But I generally drink like shittier beer, like Coors Light, Miller Lite.
It gives it. It's the longevity. It's the longevity of it all that's important. What about music? At what point did music become a big part of your life? Start with you, Nick. We'll just keep flip flopping like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Music became like pretty major, like right around like 14, 15 years old. I'd always been like a casual music fan. So Chris and I both grew up in like the same area, very small town. So there wasn't a lot happening. There wasn't concerts happening. And so my exposure to music was the radio. And then at like 14, 15 years old, I remember being able to like got my hands on, like some rock magazines like Circus and things like that. And then that was when I was just like, who the fuck are all these bands and why do they look so cool? Or like if you saw Kitty, you're like, they're fucking hot. Like I want to know what they sound like. I
just had Morgan on the podcast.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And then I had a friend who actually wound up being the other guitar player for the first iteration of Flesh and Blood Robot, who his neighbor was just like a Napster whiz kid. And so like he would just be giving us record after, hey, check this band out, check this band out, check this band out, check this band out.
What
and, like,
a time to be alive.
That was kind of like what really, really expanded my knowledge of metal and good music and shit.
That's sick. My dad was the Napster wizard. LimeWire to be truthful. He definitely would be sought out by the authorities if they hadn't put an end to it. How about for yourself, getting into music, vocals, discovering all that?
Yeah, music in general. My dad played a huge part in it, being in like kind of like 70s, 80s type bands, where, growing up, the band was always practicing in the garage every weekend.
Cool.
And,
yeah.
So I had like very
Super
young
cool.
exposure to like playing in bands and whatnot. As far as playing in bands, I don't think it was till high school where I was really kind of seriously trying to be in a band. And then when the first iteration of Flesh and Blood Robot came around was like the first time I was like really serious into it. And I was older than all you guys. I was probably like 17 at the time. Yeah, right.
That's why 16, they took 17. You. It's why they took you. That's why.
Yeah, exactly.
But
yeah, that was my first foray into vocals. And now 24 years later, we're sitting here.
Bands.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You're like the drummer of singers.
Right, yeah, pretty much.
How about your first shows? You remember going to see music for the first time, your first live music experience?
My first actual concert was Silverchair.
Really?
Yeah.
See, that's a band I don't understand why they didn't come back.
They were so good. It was them and Local H. Yeah, it was fucking awesome.
Mine was Tattoo the Earth.
Really?
Yeah.
That was a good festival.
That was a great festival. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the first one that I really like remember. Like the only other thing that I sort of remember that could maybe be passed off as like my first concert was like when I was like 8. My parents took me to like a Pink Floyd laser light show. I remember that. Cool. That was pretty fun.
It probably smelled real good too.
I don't remember that part. But yeah, that was just sparked memory. It reminded me of like there was a thing that was like laser light shows that people would go out and do on weekends and shit. But yeah, so that was like the big first show. I remember like my stepfather had to come with us because I was like 15, 16 years old, and he sat against the fence, the chain link fence, because I had to like save up enough money to buy myself and his ticket, because that was my way to go.
It's a very mature thing to do from a parent's point of view. Perspective there. You can go, but you got to save up and pay for something that's important to you.
Yeah.
It gives good values.
I had to buy 2 tickets if I wanted
exactly,
to go.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
And then, then he drove, and it was down in Detroit, which is like a good 2-hour drive from where I lived.
Also cool.
That was nice. But that was, I got introduced to a ton of great bands that way. And like, definitely like a culture shock moment, like an eye-opening to like the tattoo world and just like heavy metal culture in general. Like I've never really been exposed to like heavy metal culture, and then you just see like all the crazy people with like the 6-foot high mohawks and the crazy battle vests and all that shit running around. You're just like, oh my god, like
what is this?
I'm in the middle of a biking convention.
Yes, that's it. Or like Lord of the Rings, or like you're like, where is this world and how do I get into it? Is it something that you wanted to become more of a part of at that point, or was it still intimidating?
Yeah, well, like so one of the reasons why I still am a big Slipknot fan, and that was like they were headlining that, and at the time I had just started playing guitar, so I was like just starting to learn different riffs from different bands that I was into. And when I got my Tattoo the Earth ticket, I just kind of went through the lineup and went band by band, and like would like go on Napster and download a handful of songs and listen to it, see if I liked it. And if I liked it, then I try to learn the song and like try to learn it on guitar, and then like write it down on a list of the band that I'm going to see while I'm at the festival, shit like that. Yeah, but that was it. That's the answer.
I think so. How about your first times on stage? Remember your very, very first show, and was it together?
No, my first show was at that was it like a VFW hall? I forget. Like we threw the show. Yeah, it was like a VFW hall that we rented out and booked a bunch of bands for to play. And the cool thing was, is since it was a small town, nobody had anything else to fucking do, so we packed the place out.
I love that. Yeah, it was like 400 people there.
Yeah, it was crazy.
That's awesome. So you guys were like instant stars.
Yeah, first show. Yeah, hometown style. Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
It was
But did
fantastic.
it change like perspective of your friends or opposite sex? Hypothetically, were you automatically more interesting?
Hopefully, but I don't think anything really came out of it that way. But
How bad we were as a band. Like we learned we had to rehearse a whole lot more.
we're fucking awful.
So you do have to play a show to realize that. It's a big difference standing in front of a room of people than jamming on your own. For sure.
So my band before the first iteration of Flesh and Blood was a Weezer cover band.
Really?
And I was playing bass in that band, and we rented our hometown theater out and threw a show, and it was kind of a similar situation where it was a big deal.
My first band, we did Say It Ain't So.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. I think we've all done a Weezer song somehow.
Yeah,
They're
I did
easy.
a lot of them.
They're easier. And as Glenn Benton would say, now all the extreme metal bands look like they could play in Weezer.
Yeah, totally.
We have a friend in common, the wonderful Billy Strings, huge Cryptopsy fan, which still blows our mind all the time. He's gone one step further with you guys. You're like actually friends with him, and he's filled in with you guys live and stuff. So I want that story.
Yeah, no, Billy's a massive fan of you guys. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that you remember. I mean, he tells us the story every time I see him about how like he sent somebody over because he was playing the same night that you guys were in town. And
Correct.
He literally went on stage and was like, I could be seeing Cryptopsy right now.
This huge arena full of people in Salt
To a
Lake
bunch
City.
of like bluegrass fans are like, what the fuck are you talking about? Yeah, and then he sent you guys a cake and bought out a bunch of merch.
He literally did do that.
Yeah,
open cake surgery.
So he, I mean, like he's always been like a crazy, insane guitar player, like since he was like 3 years old. And we met him probably when he was 13, around then. He started like showing up to like the smaller Ionia, which is like our hometown, like, I don't know, like little like teen rec center shows that we were doing. And then he eventually like joined up with a band with some local dudes, and like they were playing like metalcore and stuff, and they were opening for us. And like that's how we kind of like got to know him, is because he was just around and like hanging out at the shows and stuff like that. So we've been friends with him. And then when he was grinding and coming up in the bluegrass scene, I mean, like he was playing small, tiny, like he was busking out in front of, bigger venues that people were coming outside of. And so when I lived in Pittsburgh, he'd either like crash at my place, or like I'd go and like hang out with him and his band and whoever was out with him, because he's played with a handful of different people when he's out on tour.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So like watching, like first time he comes to Pittsburgh, it's like this tiny club called Club Cafe, which is like maybe 80 people. The next time he's doing Rex Theater,
people,
which is like 500-600 people. Then he's doing Stage AE, which is like where like huge national touring bands come through.
Unbelievable.
And then eventually he's like, yeah, like we're finding out that people aren't really like caring about the openers that we're bringing, so we're just going to do 3-hour sets and do 2 nights in each town.
Successful.
It was like, oh, that took 3.5 years.
Successful. God damn. But him playing with you, like what was that story? How was he? It was before the success.
No, it was recently. We just did this in March.
Really?
Yeah. So about a year and a half ago, when we got approached by Wax Festival about doing the re-release on vinyl for our first record, our only record. And like we were stoked about it, but we're like, okay, like this is going to spark like a little bit of interest around the band, and like none of us were like, let's put the record out, take as much money as we can go, and like go away again. So like we're like, oh, maybe we could dust this shit off and see if we can't make this work again. So we started talking about it for a couple months, and then the guitar player that was on the record and had played with us the entire time, Nick Shapaniuk, he was involved, and he wasn't involved, and he was involved, and then he wasn't involved, and it kind of became a thing where like we didn't think that we were going to be able to rely on him showing up when it came time to rehearse. And it wasn't anything against him. We would have loved to have him involved, but when you have a guy that's just like, yeah, I'm down, and then he just doesn't respond to anything, and then shows back up randomly out of nowhere. It's like, okay, we probably should find somebody that's definitely going to fill in. And I I texted Billy out of the blue at like 11 p.m. And I was like, hey, dude, we're talking about doing a Flesh and Blood Robot reunion. We kind of need a fill-in guitar player. I know that you'd give a shit about this because you've always really loved that band. If it's something that you want to do and you have time for, would you want to do it? Then his response was, it's 2 a.m. in Germany. I'm laying in my bunk bed. I don't know what my schedule is like next year, but if I have the time, I will do it. And I was like, fucking sick. I'll let you know as like stuff gets going. And then when we got closer, he was like, just send me videos of you playing the parts and I'll learn them on my end. At which, you know, to my surprise, he knew the guitar parts significantly better than I did. He was showing me how to play the riffs. So, you know, actually it was like kind of a blessing to have him involved. But yeah, and like he was really into it, and he was, I mean, like they found us a place to rehearse in Grand Rapids, and like he came up 3 days in advance from the show, so that way we had 3 days of rehearsal with him. We set everything up, went through all the songs a couple times a day until like the actual night of, and then, of course the night before. This was going to be a complete surprise. We weren't going to tell anybody that he was involved until like the morning of the show. We were just going to put a show out or put a photo of us all together and be like, see you tonight. And like the last rehearsal round, he was like, hey, we should put something out, and we're like, okay, like you got, like this was kind of a thing that like you guys kind of agreed that we should all keep this a secret.
It's like, don't you have social media people that are handling you?
And then he was just like, he's like, fuck it, let's go live. And we're like, cool, let's do it. And it was like, what, 30,000 people saw that video
on his Instagram. Unbelievable.
And we had sold a majority of the tickets already, but like by 8:30 a.m. the next day, like everything
sold.
Yeah, oversold. And
super sick. Yeah. Super sick. I love that. I love how death metal transcends genres, and how people that you would not necessarily expect to be a fan turns out to be a fan.
Yeah, he's a huge man. I mean, like he just took me to see Knocked Loose last week.
Really?
When he came to town to play 2 nights in Chicago, he got in the night before, and then got us passes to go and see the band because the show was sold out.
So sick, so sick. I have to go sound check, so we're going to cut this a little shorter than I want to, but we'll wrap it up with the classic Vox and Hops wrap-up question. Your hangover cures. Every once in a while, it happens to all of us. What do you guys do when you feel like shit?
So most of the time when I'm drinking heavily, it's at tattoo conventions because I'm also a tattooer.
Correct. Yeah.
And I've found over the course of tattooing 20 years that just tattooing immediately takes it away. Like if I'm feeling like shit and 5 minutes into a tattoo,
what that
I don't know what it is, but I've just like kind of attributed it to me focusing really hard, but by the time I'm done with a tattoo, it is gone.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, well, we got to start tattooing people.
Well, so I have two solutions. One, I immediately start drinking again.
That's a dangerous one.
That gets away with it, yeah. Or a lot of cannabis, and usually some sort of like shitty meal of some sort, like a big greasy burger or pizza or something like that,
which works out well.
Yeah, and then that puts me in a mood to want to take a nap, boom, out of the hangover.
Very cool. Nick, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time hanging out with me before my show here in Chicago. We're going to keep hanging out, but not with people listening, and we're going to have a great fucking night. Cheers.
Oh yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you all so much for listening right to the end. You know that I love and appreciate that. Man, this was an awesome conversation. This is a conversation that I recorded a very long time ago, and I'm very stoked to finally get it out. I recorded it on my previous tour. Now I am on tour. It's just crazy how this happens sometimes. Massively stoked to have hung out with Nick and Chris. We had a great chat. As you just heard, at Reggie's that night was insane. We had so much fun after the show. Crazy party night, super fun tour, the Death to All tour. Massively stoked I got to connect with Nick and Chris. If you have not checked out Flesh and Blood Robot, you most definitely should, because it's simply incredible. And Billy Strings, can't wait to talk more about Billy Strings. I got to get him on the podcast. How about that? Billy, you want to come on the podcast? Massively stoked. Cheers, everyone. The Vox and Hops Metal Podcast is brought to you by Sound Talent Media and Evergreen Podcasts. I hope that you have a killer rest of the week. I will be back next week with another episode, but until then, remember to enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. Cheers, Vox and Hops heads.